Viewer discretion is advised. What you are about to hear is real, not recreated, not dramatized, not inspired by true events, real. This is the true account of something that happened inside a place you have probably been to. A place designed for children, a place built around the idea of safety. Some of what follows may be difficult to sit with, not because of anything shown, but because of what you will realize. Out of respect for the victims, Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, Colleen O'Connor, and Margaret Kohlberg, this story is told with the weight it deserves. The doors were locked, the customers were gone, the building was empty. At least, that's what they thought, because someone inside that building never left. And what happened next is so disturbing, people still believe it connects to one of the most famous horror games ever made. There is a specific kind of place that exists in almost every childhood memory in America. Loud, chaotic, bright flashing lights, the smell of cheap pizza, the sound of arcade tokens hitting plastic trays. Kids running, parents half watching, a giant animatronic mouse on a stage, frozen mid-performance, staring out at a dining room full of birthday parties and noise. Chuck E. Cheese. For millions of kids, it was the place you begged your parents to take you. It was the reward, the celebration, the one place that felt like it existed purely for fun. But there is another version of that building, a version that nobody talks about when they hand over their tokens and grab a slice of pizza. The version after closing. Picture it. The last family has walked out the door. The manager has counted the drawer. The staff are sweeping up the confetti and the dropped napkins and the arcade tickets that didn't make it to the prize counter. The animatronics on the stage have powered down, but they haven't moved. They're still sitting there, still facing the empty dining room, eyes open, frozen mid-smile. The lights dim, the arcade machines flicker. The hum of the place drops from chaos to something quieter. Something that sits wrong in your chest if you let yourself think about it too long. Places like this are not meant to be quiet. And when they are, something feels off. And on the night of December 19th, 1993, in Aurora, Colorado, something was off, and no one inside that building realized they were about to be hunted in a place they thought was safe. Before we get into what happened inside that building, you need to understand one thing. This wasn't a stranger who wandered in. This wasn't a break-in. No shattered glass, no kicked-in door. The person who committed one of the most disturbing crimes in Colorado history had something far more dangerous than a weapon when he walked through those doors that evening. He had knowledge. Nathan Dunlap was 19 years old. He had worked at that exact Chuck E. Cheese location. He knew the building. He knew the layout. He knew the back rooms, the blind spots, the corners where a person could stand and not be seen from the dining area. He knew the closing routine. He knew what time the last customer left. He knew how the staff moved through the building when they thought they were alone. He didn't just know the building, he knew how people moved inside it. Dunlap had been fired from his job at the restaurant months earlier. And in the time between losing that job and walking back through those doors, something had been building in him. A resentment, an anger at feeling disrespected, overlooked, discarded. He was young, recently unemployed, and increasingly isolated. And rather than letting that anger go, he let it grow into something with shape, something with a timeline, something with a plan. He made a plan, and this is where this case stops being just tragic and starts being something that will stay with you. Because this was not impulsive. This was not a man who snapped in the moment. This was not a sudden rage that overtook him. Nathan Dunlap thought about what he was going to do. He chose the time. He chose the environment. He chose the victims. He chose closing shift at a familiar location because he understood exactly what that meant. A skeleton crew. Employees moving through a routine they had done 100 times before. A building that was winding down. Fewer people. Predictable movement. Limited exits being locked one by one. He didn't need to rush because he knew exactly when they would be alone. And more importantly, he knew how to stay inside without being noticed. On the night of December 19th, Nathan Dunlap walked into that Chuck E. Cheese like any other customer. He sat down. He ordered food. He played games. Around him, the last families of the evening were finishing their pizza, gathering their kids, collecting their prize tickets. The arcade was doing what arcades do. Flashing, beeping, the sound of skee ball rolling down a lane. A toddler losing her mind over a claw machine. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. To everyone around him, he was just another customer. Nobody watched the clock on how long he stayed. Nobody noticed when the noise started to thin and he slipped toward the back of the building. And then he walked into the bathroom and he stayed there. Close your eyes for a second and put yourself in that building. You are on staff. You have done this closing shift a dozen times. You know every corner of this place. You know which light flickers before it catches. You know which arcade machine makes that one sound even after it powers down. You know this building the way you know your own bedroom in the dark. You feel completely alone in here. You are not. This is the part I want you to really sit with, because this is where everything changes. This is the hinge point, the moment the whole night turns on. And it didn't happen with a weapon drawn or a door kicked in. It happened in complete silence, in a bathroom stall, while children were still laughing 30 feet away. Think about that for a second. He is standing in that stall, perfectly still, listening. The sounds outside are still normal, still ordinary. A kid is crying about something. A parent is calling a name. The staff are moving through their routines, the same routines they have done every closing shift, the same motions they do without thinking, because they have done them so many times that their bodies just know. He is listening to all of it. He is tracking it. The crying child stops. A door opens. Footsteps move toward the exit. The particular sound of a family gathering itself to leave. The scrape of chairs, the zip of a bag, the last-minute scramble for a forgotten jacket. Then the door. Then quiet. Another family leaves. Same pattern. He is counting them down. Outside that bathroom, the restaurant is exhaling. The noise level drops in stages like a tide going out. First the loudest voices, then the mid-level chatter, then the background hum of the arcade machines starts to feel louder because there is less competing with it. He knows this rhythm. He has closed this restaurant himself. He knows exactly what each layer of silence means. The dining room is emptying. The staff are starting to move chairs. The front door is opening and closing less and less frequently, and he does not move. He stands in that stall and he waits, because patience is part of the plan. Patience is what makes this work. Any customer still inside would have left by now. Any reasonable person would have walked out, found a manager, said they had been in the bathroom. But he is not trying to be a reasonable person. He is trying to disappear inside the building. So he waits. The arcade machines go quiet, not all at once. One by one, someone is walking the floor and powering them down. The cascading silence of each machine cutting out is something you can actually track if you're listening for it. He is listening for it. The lights shift. The bright overhead lighting that makes the dining room feel like daytime drops to something lower, working light. The light you clean under, not the light you perform under. The voices that are left now are staff voices, familiar voices, voices he recognizes, and still he does not move. The last sounds of the public, the very last echo of the place as a place for families and birthday parties in ordinary Tuesday evenings, fade completely. The building is down to its bones now. Think about what that sounds like. A building this size, this loud just 40 minutes ago, reduced to almost nothing. The refrigeration units humming in the kitchen, the low buzz of an exit sign somewhere down a hallway, the sound of a mop hitting a tile floor in a rhythm that has become background noise. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the sounds of a place winding down the way it always does. Nobody in that building has any reason to feel afraid right now. That is exactly what he is counting on. And no one has checked the bathroom. No one has opened that door and looked at the stalls. No one checked if anyone was still inside. And by the time they realized, it was too late. What happened next in that restaurant on December 19, 1993 is the kind of thing that changes people permanently when they hear it. The employees were in their closing routine, moving through the familiar choreography of end-of-night tasks. These were co-workers, former co-workers, people Nathan Dunlap had worked beside, people who likely recognized him when they saw him, And that may have been the most disorienting part of what they experienced in those final moments. Not a stranger, not someone unknown, someone familiar, someone who knew their names. Dunlap moved through the building using every bit of knowledge he had. He knew where people would be. He knew how to approach them without triggering a group response. He isolated. He moved deliberately. He used the layout of that building the way only someone who had worked there could. 4 people were shot that night: Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, Colleen O'Connor, and Margaret Kohlberg. Sylvia Crowell was 19 years old. Ben Grant was 17. Colleen O'Connor was 17. Margaret Kohlberg was 50 years old. All 4 were killed, but there was a 5th person in that building. Bobby Stevens was also shot that night. He was 19 years old, and Bobby Stevens survived. Shot and left for dead in a building that was supposed to be locked and empty, Bobby Stevens did what almost no one in his position manages to do. He found a way to call for help. In a building that was supposed to be empty, they realized he had never been alone. Bobby Stevens became the thread that law enforcement would follow. His account, his survival, his testimony, it became the human record of what happened inside that building after the doors were locked. 5 people encountered Nathan Dunlap that night. One of them lived to tell the world what he found inside. Here is a detail that most people skip over when they tell this story. After the shooting, Nathan Dunlap did not simply leave. He took money. He took items from the restaurant before he walked out. This wasn't purely a rage killing. There was calculation layered over the anger, a plan that extended beyond the violence itself. He came for more than just retribution against people he felt had wronged him. It wasn't just rage. There was a plan behind it. That combination, emotion and calculation, personal grievance and deliberate execution, is part of what makes this case so deeply unsettling to the people who have studied it. Nathan Dunlap was arrested within approximately 12 hours of the shooting. There was no long manhunt, no months of mystery, no cold case file sitting in a drawer. He was found with evidence connecting him directly to the crime. The investigation moved fast, and the result was decisive. He was convicted in the mid-1990s on 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death. And for years, Nathan Dunlap sat on death row in Colorado as appeals wound through the courts and the debate over his sentence continued. Then, decades after that night in Aurora, the case took another turn. Colorado abolished the death penalty in 2020. Every death sentence in the state was commuted. Nathan Dunlap's sentence was changed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Decades later, the case was still affecting lives. The families of Sylvia Crowell, Ben Grant, Colleen O'Connor, and Margaret Kohlberg have had to live with the outcome of that night and every legal development that followed. Every appeal, every headline, every time the case resurfaced in the news cycle. Some wounds do not close cleanly. Some cases do not end just because a verdict is reached. Now, I want to talk about something that I think you already know is coming, because if you clicked on this video, there is a very good chance you already felt the pull of it. There is a reason this particular case keeps resurfacing in a very specific corner of the internet. A reason it gets whispered about in comment sections and Reddit threads and fan theory forums. A reason that when people talk about a certain video game, a game about a children's pizza restaurant with animatronic performers and a night shift that no one survives, someone always brings up Aurora, Colorado. 5 Nights at Freddy's. If you know the game, you already feel exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, here is what you need to know. You are a night security guard. Your job is to sit in a small office at the back of a children's pizza restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and survive until 6 in the morning. The catch is this: the animatronic characters that perform for kids during the day, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, do not power down at night. They move, and they are looking for you. Your only tools are a set of security cameras and 2 doors you can seal if something gets too close. You have limited power, the cameras drain it, the doors drain it, run out of power before 6 in the morning and the office goes dark, and something comes in. The game came out in August of 2014, and it did not just become popular, it became a phenomenon. Within weeks, YouTube was flooded with reaction videos of grown adults screaming at their screens. Within months, it had a sequel, then another, then novels, then merchandise, then a feature film. It became one of the most successful horror franchises ever built from a single indie game, and it was built almost entirely on one premise: a children's pizza restaurant, animatronic performers, and what happens in that building after dark. Years later, a game would take that same setting and turn it into one of the most successful horror franchises in history. Five Nights at Freddy's didn't invent this fear. It just gave a face to something that already existed. Now here is where I want to be straight with you, because this connection, the one between what happened in Aurora on December 19th, 1993, and what Scott Cawthon built a decade later, deserves an honest conversation rather than a sensationalized one. Scott Cawthon has never publicly stated that the Chuck E. Cheese massacre directly inspired Five Nights at Freddy's. What he has said is that the animatronic characters in places like Chuck E. Cheese always unsettled him, that there was something about the frozen smiles and the glass eyes and the way those figures would just sit there on a stage staring at you, that never felt entirely safe. He has talked about how a previous game he made received feedback that one of the characters looked like a creepy animatronic animal, and rather than being discouraged by that, he leaned into it. He asked himself, what if that creepiness was the entire point? That is where Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was born. But here is what I want you to think about. When Scott Cawthon was building the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, he was not building in a vacuum. He was building inside a cultural moment that already existed, a cultural intuition shared by millions of people who had grown up going to places like Chuck E. Cheese, that those buildings felt different after hours, that those animatronics, powered down and still in the dark, were something your brain did not fully trust, that the gap between what a place like that was during the day and what it became at night was wide enough to fall into. That intuition existed for a reason, because a building like that had already become a crime scene. The real horror in Five Nights at Freddy's is not actually the jump scares. The jump scares are the release valve. The moment your nervous system gets to discharge the tension that has been building for the previous 9 minutes of your shift. The real horror is what the game does before that moment. The slow pan of a security camera showing an empty stage. Then the same camera, same angle, and one of the chairs is different. Something has shifted. Something that was in one place is no longer there, and you did not see it move. That is the horror of the unknown occupant, the horror of a space that looks empty but isn't, the horror of something waiting in a building that everyone else believes to be clear. Sound familiar? Because that is exactly what Nathan Dunlap did in that bathroom. He was the thing on the security camera that had moved when no one was watching. He was the occupant that the closing staff did not account for. He was the reason that a building being locked does not mean a building is safe. The game and the crime are not the same story. One is supernatural fiction. One is a real tragedy that destroyed real families. Those are not interchangeable, and I want to be clear that treating them as equivalent would be wrong. But they share a blueprint. They share the specific architecture of a fear that is uniquely American. A fear built into the layout of a certain kind of building, a certain kind of franchise, a certain kind of place that was designed to feel like the safest possible environment for children, and somehow in the dark becomes the opposite of that. Chuck E. Cheese has acknowledged over the years that Five Nights at Freddy's drew from the cultural legacy of places like theirs. Not this crime specifically, not these victims, but the atmosphere, the aesthetic, the particular wrongness of an animatronic face in low light, the cultural memory of those buildings that millions of people carry and that a game designer tapped into and turned into something that made the entire world scream. That intuition did not come from nowhere, and a place in Aurora, Colorado is part of why it exists. Let me ask you something. Do you think real cases like this inspire horror stories, or is it just coincidence? Comment the word real if you think there is a genuine connection between what happened in Aurora, Colorado, and what Scott Cawthon built in that game. Comment the word coincidence if you think it's just two separate things that happen to share a setting. I read every single comment on this channel, and some of you have pointed out connections in the comments that I did not even see when I was researching this video. So let me know what you think, because here is what I keep coming back to. When we talk about the things that scare us most, we almost never talk about dark alleys. We almost never talk about places that were always dangerous. The things that truly get under our skin are the violations of safe spaces. A school, a hospital, a church, a children's restaurant. Nathan Dunlap did not target a dangerous place. He targeted a place built around the idea of celebration and childhood and joy. He knew that building. He had worked in that building. He weaponized familiarity itself. This wasn't a dark alley. This was a place designed to feel safe. And that is the root of why this case disturbs people more than 30 years later. And it is the root of why Five Nights at Freddy's works. Not the animatronics, not the jump scares, the violation of the premise. The thing that happens when a place that was supposed to protect you quietly, without announcement, stops doing that. You are supposed to be safe here. The mascot is supposed to be friendly. The building is supposed to be on your side. And then it isn't. That is what this case leaves you with. Not just the facts, not just the timeline, but the quiet realization that safety is sometimes a feeling we construct around ourselves without checking whether it is real. We lock the door and we assume the threat is on the other side of it. We close the building and we assume the building is empty. We perform the routine because the routine has always worked before, until the night it doesn't. Let's go back to the beginning one more time. When the staff at that Chuck E. Cheese in Aurora locked the doors on the night of December 19th, 1993, they believed they were doing what closing staff always does, securing the building, ending the night, locking out the outside world. There were no signs of a break-in, because there was no break-in, no shattered windows, no forced locks, no evidence of anyone cutting through a fence or climbing through a back entrance. Because he didn't need to get in. He was already there. He had been there the whole time, standing in a bathroom stall, listening to the sounds of a restaurant go quiet around him, waiting for the precise moment when the building became exactly what he needed it to be. The doors that were meant to keep danger out locked it in. The lights are off. The stage is empty. The animatronics are still facing the room, like they're watching something that already happened. There is a feeling most people have experienced at least once. You are somewhere late at night, a parking garage, an empty office building, a place that is perfectly ordinary during the day, but feels different now. The lights are the same. The walls are the same. But something sits wrong. Your body knows before your brain does. Your pace quickens. You find the exit. You tell yourself you are being irrational. Most of the time, you are. But sometimes that instinct, that low, cold wrongness, is the most important thing in the room. Next time you are somewhere late at night and it feels like you shouldn't be there, trust that feeling, because sometimes the danger isn't outside. It's already inside, and you just didn't know it yet. If you're the kind of person who gets pulled into stories like this, the ones that don't leave your head when the video ends, subscribe now. Because the next case I'm covering is even harder to forget. And trust me, you do not want to miss it.